Welcome to the Monday morning message for MAP50. This is Monday morning message number 9, so we're in week 9. We're going to cover chapter 9 today, which is some regulatory issues. For those of you that are in my HIPAA class in MAP54, then some of this is just going to be, piggybacking what you already know, and but there's a couple of other issues in here too. Before we get into chapter 9, I would like to remind you that next week will be actually coming up by the end of this week will be your midterm exam for chapters numbers 1 through 8. So not sure how many questions I'm going to give you on this one. I would probably guess somewhere in the neighborhood of 50. Typically I give 2 minutes per question, so if you have 50 questions, then you'll have 100 minutes to finish the exam. So it's going to have questions covering every single chapter, numbers 1 through 8. What I urge you to do is to just go back and reread some of those first 8 chapters. Just look at the main points, and in the beginning of the chapter, look at the objectives. The objectives of the chapter, that serves as your study guide. So take a look at those objectives. If you can answer the objective questions at the beginning of chapters in virtually any textbook, that's what's going to set you up for success on an exam. So I know it sounds a little bit daunting to go back and reread some of those chapters, but I would look at the main points, right? Look at the objectives and look at information that maybe is highlighted or bold in the chapters. Whenever a publisher highlights or bolds anything in the chapter, again, that typically says that's important. You need to try to remember this, or you need to know it. So I would just go back through and rescan those chapters a little bit, okay? So that'll be coming up at the end of this week. So for chapter number 9 this week, chapter number 9 is focused on regulatory issues and compliance. So I'm going to kind of get through to some of the main issues like HIPAA, of course, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which sets up a lot of our privacy issues or outlines what information can and cannot be shared and with who, and details out patients' rights, that they have a right to an accounting of who we've given information to. They have a right to amend protected health information, or PHI. So HIPAA, had a pretty big impact on us when we had to put it into place. And I know this is hard to believe, but when we put it in place in 2003 and had to comply with this law, I was working in the profession. So almost 20 years ago. I still remember the day that it was implemented, and handing out notice of privacy practices to patients, and we made copies of all of this stuff until we realized we didn't have to give every single patient a copy. But we had to have our notice of privacy practices readily available for our patients to view or to read, and we had to provide a copy if they requested it. So that was a learning lesson for us in my office. So anyway, that kind of covers a little bit about HIPAA. We also have some compliance issues regarding the High-Tech Act, which kind of encompasses with HIPAA, and talks about, because over the last 20 to 25 years, we've really become very technology heavy, and we all know that the majority of our offices and hospitals use some form of electronic health record or electronic medical records. And the High-Tech Act kind of laid out what our responsibilities are in protecting that information for patients and for us to protect ourselves from a risk management perspective. The Joint Commission on slide number 19, the Joint Commission For all intents and purposes, what it does is it's a nonprofit outside entity that basically accredits institutions like hospitals in particular. And what it does is it provides guidance and for the most part recognizes hospitals that do good as far as the environment of care, how well we take care of patients, that we live up to a standard of care, that we minimize safety issues for both employees and the patients, in particular the patients. And then the Joint Commission basically rates hospitals. This becomes very important because it assesses our performance, our overall performance, and that can actually lead to additional funding sources, government funding, the hospital's ability to see and accept Medicare and Medicaid patients, that type of thing. So the Joint Commission is very important in kind of helping us to make sure that we're doing things in an appropriate manner and providing the best standard of care for a patient. OSHA, of course, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, kind of sets up the rules as far as our occupations are concerned, or the standards for our occupations. It provides regulations for safety issues and that type of stuff. So OSHA's really there. I like to say, contrary to popular belief, OSHA's not there necessarily to get employers in trouble. It's there to provide information, guidance, regulation, and policy for organizations to follow or to implement in order to make sure that employees stay safe. So it's really about the employees. It's not so much that we're after employers. It's about making sure that employers are making sure that the employees remain safe on the job. Okay. CLIA, the Clinical Laboratory Amendment or Improvement Amendments of 1988, that was put into place to give us rules and guidelines or regulations as far as laboratory testing was concerned. So kind of it encompasses some of the attributes of OSHA as well, but it really did set up standardized testing in order to ensure that testing results are adequate, that they're correct, that they're repeatable, that we can get the same results over and over and over again when we check something on a patient, that we're ensuring that it's correct. And part of being correct is that we can repeat it and get the same result. So CLIA in 1988 was developed to try to kind of toughened up the regulations on laboratories and testing purposes. So that's been a good thing. Addressing fraud in healthcare. This is a major issue that often gets, I think, overlooked in my personal opinion. We do have a lot of abuse, fraudulent abuse, and it's not just hospitals or offices or doctors or providers. And it's not just patients committing fraud. Patients do it as well. We see a lot of Medicaid fraud. Here in California, Medicaid is called Medi-Cal. We gave it a nice name, but it's Medicaid. It's the state Medicaid program. We do see a lot of fraud on behalf or from patients when it comes to that. Do we have some bad doctors out there, or bad offices, or bad office practices that commit fraud? We do. I'd like to think it's fairly few and far between, in all honesty, but when it happens, we typically hear about it. It's usually a major issue. I personally have never worked for anybody or for an organization that I knew or had even a suspicion that anything hanky was going on as far as the billing was concerned in particular. So that's never been an issue that I've been faced with personally. So I firmly believe that, like most professions, the majority of people that are doing this work are good people with good intentions, good morals and values and ethics. The majority of us get into this profession because we want to, help other people. We want to be involved in their lives and help promote good health care. But there are abuses that happen. Usually what ends up happening, and again, just my personal opinion, typically when fraud does happen, from a doctor's perspective, a good case for you to look at potentially is Dr. Fareed Fatah. First name spelled Fareed, last name is Fata. This was a oncologist in the state of Michigan who was committing Medicare fraud and was eventually caught after years of people watching him, like the FBI. And when they finally built the case against him, they realized that he had committed, I think, somewhere between $30 and $35 million worth of Medicare fraud. When I look at that, just from a personal perspective, to me that says the doctor was stealing from me. I pay Medicare taxes. If you're employed and receive a paycheck from an employer, you pay Medicare taxes. This is your money. So this particular physician was stealing our money in order to enrich himself. Usually when that stuff happens, people get caught eventually. And, unfortunately, it really harms us. It creates inflation and healthcare costs. And this is one of the reasons why we see increases every year in our health insurance premiums. And so it's really important to catch these things and to hopefully get the people that do this type of stuff out of healthcare so that the good people can get back to work and do what they need to do for patients. So, it gives you some examples in your PowerPoint of fraud, like things like billing for procedures that weren't done. That's something that Dr. Fatah had done. Billing for procedures or performing procedures that were unnecessary, not medically necessary. Those are things that happen from time to time with the bad people. So, upcoding, charging or coding higher a particular procedure than what was actually performed. This is fraud. So that's not legal. So anyway. Kind of gives you a broad overview of this particular chapter. So once again, as always, I say have a great week. I look forward to seeing you next week. As always, if you have comments, concerns, rude remarks, suggestions, please feel free to email me and let me know. And I will be happy to get back to you as quickly as I can. So until next week. And don't forget, you're going to have a midterm exam, which will be by next Sunday, I believe. But I will send out a reminder to all of you about it. Have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you next Monday.